Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about long-term goals or achievements. I get asked about this topic a lot, is how do you plan for and break down goals that are going to take multiple years? And this video is not geared towards any sort of set time frame, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, literally any goal that's going to take longer than about a year. What we're going to talk about today is going to be beneficial for that. And of course, the irony is that I'm talking about this with moving boxes in the background, which is a goal of mine and my husband's that's been in the works for about 2 years now. When we signed our lease on this apartment, we signed a 2-year lease knowing that as soon as it was up, we were going to be moving. So it is kind of ironic that I'm now talking about this topic with the boxes behind me. But in this video, I'm gonna go through just a bunch of thoughts and tips, suggestions for any goals that you have that are going to take longer than a year. Because I understand it can be difficult to set yearly goals, which is something we talk about a lot, something a lot of people want to do and are encouraged to do. But when you have goals that you know are gonna take you 2, 5, plus years, it can be really hard to start working on those because you don't know where to start and how to go about it. So let's start talking about it. The first thing that I want to cover is don't put a strict timeline on it. Now, there might be some goals that fall into this category for you that already have a set timeline, right? Like my moving goal had a set timeline. Maybe you're in school that has a set timeline. Maybe you're planning a wedding, right? That has a finite timeline. But for goals where the timeline is not exactly set, like you want to buy a house at some point, or you want to pay off a certain amount of debt or all of your debt, goals like that where they don't have a set timeline, I would encourage you not to put one because we can't see that far out in the future. And I have struggled with this in the past. There was a point, this is a goal I'm gonna reference a lot in this video. There was a point in my life where I had a significant amount of credit card debt that I wanted to pay off. And as someone who is a math major, someone who loves numbers and spreadsheets, I wanted to always have a spreadsheet where I was calculating like, what is the date that I could work towards? And I'm gonna talk a little bit later why sometimes I think that that's helpful. But I think if I had gone into it and said, I'm gonna pay off my debt by this date, there's no way I was gonna hit that exact date. There's no way, because I can't predict that far into the future. I don't know what things about my life are going to change, both for the positive or for the negative, that are going to impact whether or not I can hit that individual date. There were some things that happened in my life, and I have no idea, like when I first set that goal, I wish I still had all those numbers. Like when I first set out to achieve that goal, what I thought the date was gonna be, and I'm sure I set one, because this was years ago, this was pre-Sam. I finished paying it off once I started dating my now husband, but I started working on it years. I may have still even been in a prior relationship at that point. So I was definitely setting goals in a very different way back then. And so I don't know what the original date I set and whether I finish it sooner or finish it later. But a lot about my life changed in that time. Some for the positive, like I would get a raise at work or when Sam moved in, and so my rent went down, that I could contribute more to the debt. But then there were things that were more negative when things got more expensive, and so my ability to contribute to the debt went down. And I couldn't have predicted any of those things. I could not have predicted the amount of friends that were gonna get married and flights I was gonna have to take that year. So if the date is totally up to you, don't start with a set date. Don't start with a set date, because it's gonna fluctuate. Life is gonna change, and you are not going to know that far out. And it is so hard to predict the future. And when you're wrong, you feel like you're failing. And you are not a failure, but when you estimate a date and it doesn't end up happening, it can make you feel less successful and more likely to give up. You can still start to work on and make significant progress, which is what we're gonna talk about in the rest of this video, without having a final end date planned. So the first thing that I want you to do is define the outcome. Now that we've taken our timeline hats off and the timeline is whatever it's gonna be, what does the outcome of that goal look like? If time is no constraint and you are considered done, as of whatever you feel that goal looks like done right now. This could change, and we'll talk about refreshing in a little bit, but as of right now, with everything you know right now, when you would consider that goal done, what does that look like? Now, some goals are gonna be a lot easier than others, right? When the debt is at zero, when I own a house, right? Those kinds of goals are really easy to say. When I graduate from school, you can get really specific. But think about what are some of the other characteristics about that goal that are important to you besides just that one concrete thing. when debt is at zero, but I'm still enjoying my life. By the way, I'm not a financial expert and I'm using paying off my personal credit card debt as the example for this video. I am not here to tell you how to pay off debt or not pay off debt. That's not the point of this video. So we can all agree to disagree on, so if you have a different methodology or opinion on how to pay that off, that's not the point of this video. Maybe you want to graduate school in X amount of years, that's the goal, with a certain GPA. Maybe you want to buy a certain type of house in a certain neighborhood or certain area. I literally just had this conversation with my husband. We could buy a house right now if we really wanted to, but we wouldn't be able to live in the area we want to live, in the size that we want to live at this point in our lives. And so it just makes more sense to rent right now. And that's a decision. So really, you know, the goal is to buy a house, but it's to buy a house in the area that we want to live with the size that we want to live for that time in our lives. So get really clear on what the outcome of that goal looks like. How do you want to feel at the end of it? How do you want to feel while you're working on it? And ultimately, what would it look like when you can say, I have achieved that goal? All right, so we have our goal. We've defined what it's gonna look like when we achieve it at some date in the future that may or may not be set. Next up is creating milestones right now. And you could create multiple milestones. Again, some goals are gonna be more obvious than others, the milestones that are going to exist, but at least one, at least that first milestone, knowing what is that first big step that I want to hit. And you have to set it before you start working on it. Because if you think you're gonna see those milestones along the way, you're not. Because once you get there, you are gonna be thinking about the next one or getting to that end state, and you're gonna forget how far you've come. So you've got to pick those milestones in advance, right? Keeping with the paying off the debt. Maybe it was once 10% of it was paid off. That's, you know, milestone number one, or depending on the amount of debt, right? Maybe it's you got it from 5 figures to 4 figures of debt, whatever it is. What is that first milestone that you are working towards that is going to be a stepping stone for you? And there's no right or wrong in terms of how big these milestones should be. I just need you to have one. I need you to have one shorter milestone that you're working towards. You know the ultimate goal, you know the outcome you're working towards, but you need something shorter to focus on at first. All right, next up after that is to celebrate along the way. These big giant goals that are gonna take us years and years to accomplish, if we wait to celebrate until the end, we're way less likely to achieve it because we are gonna feel so unsuccessful along the way. So not only do I want you to celebrate at that milestone that you just picked in the last step, I want you to celebrate other times as well. The little wins, you know, I'm a big supporter of celebrating the small wins and the little progress that you make. But anytime that you feel proud, let me know actually if you would find a whole video on celebrating beneficial. I actually do this as a whole session with my one-on-one clients. We do a whole week about celebrate. It's the last session. That makes sense. But we talk all about celebrating our wins because that is something I think a lot of us struggle with when it comes to goals, but can make a big impact on having us achieve our goals. So make sure that you are celebrating along the way and not just waiting until the end when you have accomplished whatever it is that you've accomplished. The next step, the next key to these long-term goals is tracking your overarching progress. Now, I do think that the little steps that you're taking, I would track them the way that you track your goals normally, right? If you're working on paying off debt and one of the steps to that is tracking your money every single day, that's on your everyday goal planner that you're checking in. But if you're working on paying off debt, I want you to have somewhere that you are tracking the progress from start to finish. And yep, this is a multiple year tracker. And so you might change your mind and decide that you want to do it in a different format. I think I changed the way I was tracking my debt pay down a number of times over the course of the journey, but I always had the information, which again is why I'm baffled I can't find it. It may be on my old corporate computer, which I took all those, like any personal files I had on that computer to an external. That might be where it's living. If I really wanted to know the dates that I started that goal and then finished that goal, because that was something I worked on for years, but I was able to track it as I went. And I can hear it now. I understand that sometimes the problem is when you're working on goals for a really long time, those little small steps don't feel like they're making a dent. And let's say you're paying off thousands of dollars of debt, saving an extra $5 doesn't feel like a lot. So what you have to figure out is what is the updating Like, how often do you want to update the tracker to make you feel good about the progress that you're making? This is going to be an individual decision based on how motivated you are. I liked seeing the number change, even if it was just a little bit. Like in my spreadsheet, I had like the number at the top, which was the total debt. And then I had like all the different payments that I made. And so even if I made the smallest payment, I loved seeing the number change even a little bit. It made me feel like we were getting somewhere. That was important to me. But if you are somebody who's like, no, if I only, saved $5, that would not make me feel successful, maybe you update it on a less frequent basis so that you're seeing bigger number changes. The other thing about the tracker is having where you started, because if you don't know where you started, again, you are only going to be focused on how far you have left to go instead of where you came from. So always include the starting point. The debt is just the easiest example here, right? So have your starting number and then your current number, and being able to see the difference between those made such a difference for me. And so whatever the long-term goal that you're working on is, right? Maybe it's decluttering your house and it's going to take you more than a year, given the amount of time you can dedicate to it, to get through all of the spaces and the rooms in your home. And so you make a list of all the rooms in your home and all the spaces, and it adds up to 30 spaces. I'm literally making up numbers. Then as you finish them, you're able to track it and check those off, and you can see how many you've done. I made the biggest mistake when I was using my wedding to-do list, which was also in a Google spreadsheet. I made the mistake of deleting things instead of crossing them off, because then I would delete things and I would look and I'd be like, my list is still very long and I couldn't see the progress I was making. So instead of deleting things, you cross things off and you can see the progress that you're making. Now, this is where I promised I was going to talk about a little bit the date that I was like, that I could predict that I was going to pay off my debt, and how the date that I predicted was never going to be the actual date that I ended up hitting. But what I did like to do was every time I updated my tracker, I had, again, math nerd, my spreadsheet had all kinds of formulas based on my average numbers, like on average how much I was paying off. It did not account for those big fluctuations based on big life changes. I could see what is the estimated date that I could pay my debt off at this rate. And sometimes it went up and sometimes it went down, but I did like being able to see that. That's not gonna work for every goal, and it's not gonna work for every person, but it was something that helped me personally with that goal. The next important thing to do as you're working on a goal that's gonna take multiple years is you gotta check in with it regularly. Now, I did a whole video last month on checking in and refreshing your goals, and that video is more about like, I have these annual goals and I'm checking in with them on a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis. For this goal, some of that still applies. It definitely still applies. But even more so, it's important to make sure that you are checking in with that outcome. Is the outcome I'm working towards still important? Checking in with the why. Is the reason I'm working towards this goal still important to me? There are a lot of multi-year goals that your why could change over time. It doesn't actually change the goal. It doesn't actually change the outcome, but the why behind the outcome could very well change. And that can have such an impact when you don't even realize it. It can have such an impact in the background on you working towards that goal. So I want you to make sure that you are checking in with the why behind that goal a lot, because it's way more likely to change for a goal that is going to take a long time. The other important thing to check in with on a goal that's going to take a while is the breakdown of that goal. What steps are working? What steps do I like? What steps are making progress? What steps aren't working? What steps am I dreading? Can I change those? Can I do those less frequently? Making sure that you are checking in with the action steps and the breakdown that you can take towards achieving that goal. A lot of times there's more than one way to achieve a goal. And so you might be working on a goal for multiple years and there's an action step that's been working for you for months. And then you get to a certain point and you're sick of that action step. You're bored, you're like, this is not working, and you tend to give up. And it really is just about that action step. But if you're checking in with yourself regularly and you're like, okay, that goal, the outcome, I still want it. The why, still there, still important to me. What's a different action step? What's another way that I can still make progress on this goal without doing the same thing that I have been doing for multiple months or even multiple years. Again, especially for goals that are going to take multiple years, having options for your action steps is going to be really important. And the last thing I want to talk about related to multi-year goals is to be flexible. It is really difficult to have a goal that's going to take you years and years and be able to map it out from the beginning and follow that exact plan exactly. Like, it's just not going to happen. Life changes way too frequently. So you are going to have to be flexible. If you have a goal that is going to take you multiple years, you're going to have to change your mind, change your timeline, change your prioritization, change your action steps. There's going to be change, and there's going to have to be flexibility involved in order to reach that final end state. And I know for a lot of us that can be really tough, but it is going to be key if you're going to achieve a goal that's going to take multiple years. All right, that is it. Those are my thoughts and tips on setting a goal that is going to take multiple years. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have a goal that you're working on right now that's going to take you a few years, I would love for you to share it down in the comments. I can always use more examples. I typically share examples from my own personal goals, but I would love to be able to give you examples or tips or ideas based on your specific goal, because I know it can be really helpful to hear like an idea based on whatever it is that you're actually working on. And for a lot of goals, even if I've never worked on it, I usually am pretty good at coming up with ideas and suggestions. Sometimes I think it's just having a third party, like another set of eyes that has never been in your shoes. But I also do think because of all the different people that I've helped with all these different goals, I have a lot of ideas and experience working on lots of different goals by proxy. So hopefully I will be able to help you with some suggestions or ideas if you want to leave those down in the comments. And if you did like this video, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. If you're new here, please click that subscribe button. I upload new videos every week focused on helping you achieve your goals. Thank you so much for watching. And now the heater decides that it wants to be really loud. That's what that noise is. My New York City heater.